So my name is Aakash Odedra, Artistic Director of Aakash Odedra Company. I had trained officially in Kathak from the age of 8 and in Bharatanatyam from the age of 14. Kathak with Nilima Devi, Bharatanatyam with Chitraleka Bolar. I was obsessed with dance. Everything was dance for me. You know, opening a door was dance. Picking up a glass was dance. Every aspect, every breath I took felt like it was a choreography or an expression and a connection into this world. So I was so obsessed as a child. And when I learned to walk, I learned to walk on my toes. So they always used to say, oh, he's going to be a dancer. And lo and behold, that's what I became. Because anytime they put any music on, that was it. There was a spirit deeply embedded inside me, which was unleashed. And then it was almost like the world around me didn't exist. Nothing existed, only me and this energy. And I think why Kathak? I often ask myself the same question. Why Bharatanatyam? Because as a child, I was always fascinated with mythology, you know, the sense of gods and goddesses. We didn't have one god which sat on a throne and sort of told us this is right and that's wrong. We had gods that danced. We had gods that were part human. We had gods that made mistakes. We had gods that could fly, fight, disappear. So there's this sense of imagination that it fulfilled in me as a child. And I think it was this sense of mythology and the sense of nothing was impossible that made me connect to this. And I think far beyond that, there was something in my genetics, in my roots, that when I heard classical music or music which originated in India, it sort of set off something on a cellular level that made me move. It made each breath worthwhile breathing. It made me feel alive. And I think that sense of obsession, I think my family and my parents saw that. And then after asking them for a long time, they sort of made me go to formal classes, you know, after a lot of begging. When I started the classes, it was like my world completely opened up. It was like the whole week was in anticipation for the weekend where my classes would happen, and I would get to go to my teacher and be in that moment for that hour. And that was the importance of it. So I happily danced classical styles all my life, or, you know, for about 18 odd years. Then I found that somehow I felt capped and limited because I was telling stories of gods, goddesses, you know, women picking up pots and, you know, Krishna taking the cows and herding the cows and breaking these pots and all these sort of stories. But I felt like I wasn't telling the story of the life that I was living. And I felt as a British Asian, it was important for me to be able to tell my story and the story of people around me. And what was more important, as an artist, you learn very quickly to be able to see life through the lens of the character that you're playing. So in the case of Indian classical dance, I was always playing some mythological character, but in reality, I was playing me. But then when I looked at the audience, they didn't understand the mythology that I spoke about. So it was important for me to be able to speak a language that was current, that is of today, that's not 2000 years old and belongs to a specific geographical boundary, but that it spoke very openly about people to people. And I think that was my point of transition and interest in contemporary dance. Then, after many years of dancing Kathak, Akram Khan saw me. And when he saw me, I remember the first thing he said to me. He said, "You remind me of myself." And at that time, I didn't think of it as a big thing. But now, you know, it feels like a big thing that he saw himself in me. And then eventually, a few years later, he started to mentor me. And he introduced me to the world of contemporary dance. You know, I could say that he was like, for me, you know, setting out on uncharted seas. And in this sort of current and turbulent ocean, there was this one lighthouse for me. It was Akram. And, you know, he sort of shone the light in the direction that I could go to be able to explore a new world. And then he created a piece alongside Sidi Larbi and Russell Malafan called Rising. Now, I think at that point in time, there was this full evening of solos created on an individual by three of Europe's top leading contemporary artists. So there was a great curiosity amongst people, and there was a lot of pressure on me. But what was more important for me was that I had a sense of doing a crash course in contemporary dance, from going from no contemporary to 101 with Europe's three leading choreographers. So that became my university. That became my life in contemporary dance. So it then very quickly made me understand that I was able to speak the language of today, of my generation, of British Asians, who are a combination of the past and the present. And I think for me, this sort of transition then became a massive focal point in my life. And here I am today. I think as an Asian, and especially as a British Asian, because it's interesting, when you go to India, you're called an NRI, a non-residential Indian. And when you're here, you're a British citizen, but you're brown. So you kind of live in this very strange twilight zone in your life. But I think as an Asian, it has been very important for me to be able to carve a path and a route out for myself, because that path, I think, allows other generations to be more adventurous, to explore their creativity, their potential. And I think in this process, in all honesty, I think the biggest art form you have to learn is sacrifice of your everything that's precious to you. In this process, you learn to lose everything and everyone that you've loved, so that there's room for your lover. Who do I call the lover? Dance in this aspect leaves no room for anyone or anything in your life. It takes you to a place where you become so isolated that there's room only for one being, one entity, one object. That's dance, and your commitment to that. So sacrifice becomes the art that you learn very early and very quickly in this process. And I think as a Brit Asian, I think the sacrifice it feels is something that I would hope will benefit generations to come. The climate that we're in, it feels like we're still in a cocooning stage. As a caterpillar goes through metamorphosis, it changes, it goes through a drastic shift in its physicality. It then emerges out of there with wings, with the ability to fly and see life from a very different perspective. And I think this change is forcing us to see life in a different way. We have been so accustomed to working in a particular fashion and manner that we've almost become complacent in our sort of view of life and creativity, because ultimately dance is a depiction of life, of creativity. And in this ever changing climate, it's important to be able to connect to people who are also changing with you. It's not an individual. A lot of the time, we feel as people who are going through change, we look at it from a very singular perspective, that I'm going through change. My life is bad. COVID is happening. However, the whole world, the cosmos, life around us is all going through massive change. And we have a program where we try and reach out to people in different ways. For me, the motto isn't so much about being able to, perform to people, impress people, but it's about connecting to people. And now we're in a different form, in a different era. I think it's important, just as my art from Kathak has done in the past. It's embraced the invasions that have come to India. When the Mughals invaded, Kathak went from the Hindu temples to the Mughal courts. It adapted. Then it went from the Mughal courts to the proscenium stage. So there was this organic shift that happened. And for me, now there's a big shift happening around us, and it's about embracing the sense of this technology. What can it do and how can it reach people? And we are trying to sort of connect to people in different ways. The intention is the same, it's just the vehicle that we use that has shifted. And change for me is the only constant in life. And whatever change comes my way, rather than me looking at it from a negative perspective, I think it's important to remember that each one of these changes is like a test of your creativity, a test of your perseverance, and most of all, a test of your passion and love and dedication towards your dance, your art form. And I think through this sense and this essence of change, we are able to connect to people, to dancers, to human beings through social media, through a telephone conversation. I feel like I've spoken and connected to more people in this period than I have previously. As a South Asian dancer, I think we have multiple layers of social bonding, let's say, that sort of attach us to the fabric in a very different way to, say, a non-Asian dancer. You know, first of all, so we have our gurus, we have the people who we were connected to, that we grew up around. And I think all of these people are also faced with change. Some, you know, in the generation below me, in my generation, are adapting to this change very quickly, and others are struggling. So for us, it's also important to be able to lend a hand to them and, you know, pull them forward with us as well, because there was a point when I was young that my guru held my hand and pulled me forward. So I think that there's this sense of unity and community that is building through this process, which I think for me isn't a negative thing, it's an increasingly and massively positive thing. And I think it also has given us the chance to be able to view each other more. Most of us are so busy performing all the time. So I think it's given us the chance to be able to see each other online, you know, perform in different ways that we haven't seen each other, and also explore the other person's life a bit more, you know, through these sort of conversations that have been happening online. And I think it's important because also it's brought to the surface many issues that we were faced with as a South Asian community that were really bubbling inside. And I think when we emerge from this, like the caterpillar with wings, we will be able to fly and view the world differently and hopefully land on a new flower to create a new sense of creativity. And I think that's important.